the Canadian Coalition for Pay Equity. They will be appearing virtually, and appearing for the coalition will be Krista Cowling, who I think is on the screen now. And Krista, can you hear me well?
I can hear you well, yes.
And we can hear you. So you have the floor. Please proceed. Thank you for being here.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to start just with a small correction. We're the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity, not the Canadian Coalition for Pay Equity. So we're an organization whose goal is a fair and equitable society. So as an organization, we work to achieve this by ensuring the realization of pay equity and to just working conditions for people in women-dominated jobs. So first, I'm going to focus mainly on a paid sick leave. I just want to make sure that we understand what pay equity is, as it's in the name of our organization. So pay equality is equal pay for equal work. So that's when we would compare wages between individuals in the same job, where pay equity is equal pay for work of equal value. So we do this by comparing jobs that are predominantly done by men to jobs that are predominantly done by women. Today I want to talk about paid sick leave. So the COVID-19 pandemic really illustrated that paid sick leave is also a public health measure, as it's critical to protecting the health and safety of workers, as well as the public that they serve, by helping to contain the spread of viruses. So everyday New Brunswickers are forced to put their health, wages, and jobs at risk when they become ill. And in the case of many women, when they are required to care for a sick child or loved one. In this presentation, I'm going to be making recommendations on the proposed establishment of 10 paid sick days using a gender-based analysis. So this is going to put a particular focus on its impact on women in the labor force. So the proposed changes are intended to protect employee rights and increase gender equality. So if we look at the work sectors that are at risk, workers who experience the greatest economic insecurity are also the least likely to have access to paid sick leave. What type of work is least likely to offer paid sick days? Low wage and part-time jobs. Over 58% of Canadians don't have access to paid sick leave, and that number increases to 70% for lower wage industries. Who are most likely to be employed in these precarious jobs? Women, and disproportionately racialized women. They are overrepresented in occupations and industries with lower job quality as a result of the systemic undervaluing of jobs historically or mostly done by women, such as care workers, cashiers, cleaners, clerical, and catering. So the 5 C's. New Brunswick women make up the majority of minimum wage earners and those who hold multiple jobs. As a result, they are less likely to have access to paid sick leave. The gender wage gap is something that continues to put women at an economic disadvantage. There was a $9,700 gap between the median annual income of men and women in New Brunswick in 2020, and this gap is even greater for Indigenous and racialized women in New Brunswick. So lower earnings make it even more difficult for women to take unpaid leave. If we look at that gap more closely, we'll see that the stats I have are from 2016. We see that Indigenous women earned had a 45% gap compared to the earnings of men. Immigrant women saw a 38% gap, with women overall seeing a 31% gap in wages compared to their male counterparts. So when we look at the impact of low wages, we see that the COVID 19 pandemic really highlighted the importance of these low-wage jobs. Many of them earning the title of essential workers and even seeing temporary pay bumps in some cases. So we've seen the vulnerability of the workers that are in these jobs. Not only are they low paid, but often they have no sick leave. So these are workers who do not have the luxury of choosing between a day's worth of pay and their health. I have a statistic here from 2022 that says that more than 3/4 of Canadians, that's 78%, say their personal finances have worsened due to inflation. And over half of Canadians, 54%, say they're living paycheck to paycheck. So when we're living paycheck to paycheck, that difference of an unpaid sick day and a paid sick day make a huge difference. Over the past few years, we heard from care workers who care for the most vulnerable New Brunswickers. So seniors, children, and women fleeing violence, people living with disabilities. And these care workers couldn't afford to stay home sick, but did not want to risk passing on their illness to others. So we must learn from the pandemic because we know the lack of paid sick days made some workplaces unsafe as people went to work sick because they could not afford to stay home. This was particularly problematic in long-term care facilities, which suffered from high infection rates. We even had one home care worker told us that she lost a longtime client because she took unpaid time off when she contracted COVID. When she returned to work a week later, not only had she lost a week's worth of pay, but she also lost a paying client. So it's the perfect storm. Lower wage workers don't have paid days, but they cannot afford to stay home. So they go to work, which contributes to spreading illness. Women make up nearly half of the labor force, and at the same time, women bear a disproportionate share of family caregiving responsibilities. So the lack of paid sick leave forces women to make difficult decisions, like going to work when they are sick, or deal with a large gap in their next paycheck. That gap could be the difference in their ability to pay rent or put food on the table. And this situation is compounded for single mothers who often shoulder the brunt of their children's health care as well as their own. Access to paid sick leave could lessen the economic burden faced by women who bear a disproportionate share of family caregiving responsibilities. They are more likely to need time off to care for sick children and loved ones. Paid sick leave would provide them more stability and security while benefiting their employers through improved productivity and retention. So to summarize, refusing to provide paid sick leave is to subject the lower paid workforce, which is largely female and racialized, to poor working conditions and to put their lives at risk. If we want the labor market to work for all of us, we need a systemic change in how we value and pay for women's work. And that includes better working conditions such as paid sick leave. Paid sick leave saves lives, and the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity calls on this committee to support and recommend the adoption of Bill 27 to provide 10 paid sick days to every New Brunswicker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuhn.
Chair, thank you, Ms. Cowling, for your presentation, and thanks to the Pay Equity Coalition for its steady and relentless work to achieve pay equity in our province. Can I ask you to repeat your list of occupations that are dominated by women?
Yeah, so we call them the 5 C's. So those would be care workers, cashiers, cleaners, clerical, and catering.
Okay. And has the coalition actually got statistics on the percentage of women in the workforce, or the percentage of women who, let me think about the percentage of employees in these positions who or workers in these positions who are women? So do you have those kind of numbers So in fact, what percentage of care workers are women, what percentage of cashiers are women, and so on?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I could see if someone in our office could maybe follow up, if they have access to what a breakdown of that would look like.
That would be great. Has the coalition collected any information from women about the impacts of being ill or having to care for ill children, or going to health medical appointments in the absence of
Yeah,
paid
I
sick leave?
have spoken to women who have shared some stories with me recently about how lack of paid sick days, or even in jobs where they had a couple of paid sick days, but a lower number, like like 3 paid sick days, for example, is one of the folks that I talked to, was that it ultimately resulted in them having to take more time off or more unpaid leave because they weren't able to resolve health issues that they had with the time that they had. So it meant that they were continuing to go to work. They weren't able to take that time off to get better. Their health then worsened as a result of that. Which resulted in them having to take a leave from their job, which resulted in them losing their job. So I do have some stories like that from folks. I'm also just people sharing that the amount of women that have more than one job, or that have backup jobs or these burner jobs to make ends meet if they do get sick, that because someone was sharing with me, well, they have a job that they say pays okay, they're paid $18 an hour, but missing just a day of work, that's $220. So that's heat for the month. So if they take that, if they're living paycheck to paycheck and they take that day off, how do they pay for that at the end of the month? Does it mean that next month now they're wearing sweaters and they're trying to keep their heat down? And what does that contribute then to taking more sick days down the road? So it's really putting people in these impossible kind of balancing acts of trying to make ends meet.
Thank you. I'll turn this over to colleagues now.
I'm going to alternate, okay? Ms. Baucus had a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I found it very interesting. I'm usually pretty good at copying down lots of notes quickly, but you had so much information. Is there a chance, please, that we could get a copy of your presentation, perhaps send it to the clerk? Because there was, I think, a lot of useful information in that I'd like to review again.
Absolutely. Yes, I can do that.
Okay, and I only got 4 Cs. So they were the care workers, the cashiers, the clerical, and the catering and
Cleaners.
cleaners. Okay. But yes, I found it very interesting, and if you could provide us with that, your presentation, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank
That
you.
was my question, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Anyone else from the government side? Mr. Chasson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You do run a tight ship, I have to say, today. Well, good morning. So I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned that COVID was like a real eye-opener for employees and employers also. Do you think that businesses, it kind of forced businesses to adapt, or are you seeing any movement, with businesses where it's like, okay, we might have to do things differently because, COVID is still, with us, or there might be other diseases that, will force our employees to take, 4 or 5 days off. Are you seeing positive signs that, the employers are also trying to adapt to the new reality?
Your mic cut out for a little bit of that, but I think I caught that as if I see positives from employers that are trying to adapt. Is that the?
Yeah, well, obviously we're talking about the fact that, with COVID, a lot of employees had to take some, more than just one day off in order to, to recover. I imagine it was also an eye-opener for businesses, seeing that, they were losing employees for 4 or 5 days. So I'm just wondering, are you seeing any positives, with businesses? Are they adapting? Are they putting in new measures to maybe try and help the employees?
Yeah, I can say myself as a business owner that one of the ongoing struggles has been has just been seeing that more employees are getting sick in general. I think in part because of other changes that have happened at a more systemic level of removing other health precautions. Right now, I mean, each business is kind of left to figure out solutions between themselves and their own team. So I see that establishing 10 paid sick days really gives kind of everyone a clear idea of what to expect and helps people better manage, helps us better manage our teams. I don't know if there's anything really particular that I could speak to about positive things businesses have been doing aside from that.
Well, I guess I'm just curious because, what the bill is proposing is that we're forcing businesses to offer paid sick leave. But I'm just wondering if by the force of COVID and all, the new reality, if you can say it that way, that if they're not adapting themselves to the fact that some of their employees might have to take, 4 or 5 days off, or they're not offering, by themselves, maybe paid sick days. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing that tendency, in the business community and yourself as a business owner, I imagine your network. I'm just wondering if they're having talks, if they're doing it on their own, do we actually have to implement something and force them to do it? Maybe it's already being done.
I think that this legislation is really important, and that forcing businesses across the table to offer 10 paid sick days is really valuable, and that leaving it in the hands to individual businesses is going to make it a lot harder for our workplace in general. I also think that businesses who haven't voluntarily added paid sick leave will see a benefit to their business in just in how employees are, able to keep their job and to just feel more secure in their employment, which often relates to better retention and productivity of employees as well.
There's no doubt, no one's going to argue that, it'd be a great thing, obviously paid sick leaves. I'm from a small, rural area of the province, and there's a lot of smaller businesses. And I think before we actually, put this in place or even, go to the next step, we really have to consult the small business owners, because some of them are in difficult situations. So for example, if you take daycares, like smaller daycares, if an employee does become ill, then it puts them in a really difficult situation. So I think there's planning that has to be, involved. They've got to I think, have to work with the employees to try and find a solution or a way of actually having it so that, the business doesn't actually have to close. So not only will they have to pay for the sick leave, but if they actually close their business because, the 2 employees, for example, are sick, then there's actually a greater loss of money for the business.
Right, and at the same time, you could say that those, 2 employees, if they go to work sick, could result in 10 sick children, which isn't something that parents, that kind of compounds the issue as well, right? Now you have other parents that might have to take time off to take care of sick kids. Like, we really see that can have an exponential impact, just rippling throughout the workforce.
No, and it's a good point. And I think my point is, it's hard to impose that on businesses without having them really involved in the process, because especially for smaller businesses in rural areas of the province where, you might only have 1 or 2 employees, it has a huge impact on the business. So I think it's a
And I think
good conversation
too,
to
we
have. and I
heard
think we should
earlier
continue.
that offering support for businesses, particularly small businesses and medium-sized businesses, can be a really helpful measure.
Yeah.
But each business and industry is going to be so different. A retail business where shutting the door for a day could mean losing revenue for a day is a lot different than a business where that might not face that same kind of impact from one employee's lost missed day of work.
I appreciate your contribution to our morning deliberations.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the questions of my colleagues. Thank you very much.